To keep up with our most recent articles, remember to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment with your ideas. On a Tuesday, the email came in between a flyer from the grocery shop and a reminder that my library books were due. I'm thinking of you and wondering if I might James it. Just a simple subject line. James. Thomas had been dead for 3 years? 4? After a loss, time becomes slick. James was not your typical pal. He was the second P in Thomas's inseparable pod, his best friend from boyhood. They had experienced first beers, college dorm rooms, and skin knees together. In the end, James served as our wedding's best man. I felt a weird shock when I saw his name appear. It was a mixture of warmth and a sudden intense anguish that I hadn't experienced in months. With the late fall sun shining through the living room windows and illuminating dust motes whirling in the air, particles of the life Thomas and I had created, the house felt especially peaceful that afternoon. I read the email again. He said he will be in the state for a work conference around an hour away and that he would want to stop by for an afternoon, perhaps to catch up and get coffee if I was open to it. It sounded harmless enough, courteous even, but following Thomas's death, I had a strange uneasiness in my stomach. The initial barrage of calls for assistance, casseroles, and visits slowly subsided to a trickle before largely ceasing. Not because of malice, I believe, but because everyone else's lives had to move on. During those first terrible weeks, James had called a few times and sent flowers, his voice brimming with mutual grief, but suddenly there had been nothing. Nor had I contacted them. What could be said? Without Thomas, the bond between us felt strained and uncomfortable. A part of me wanted to refuse, to avoid disturbing my peaceful routine. A smaller, rattling part of you that you hadn't addressed much sensed a glimmer of curiosity, but grief makes you protective of your alone. Perhaps speaking with James would be like having a small part of Thomas returned, even if it was only for a single afternoon. James knew Thomas in ways I never did, including the boyhood secrets and the preemie experiences. It would be great to see you, James. Please let me know which day would be most convenient. I sent back a brief response. He responded promptly, saying that he had planned to arrive at 2 on Friday afternoon. All of a sudden, my peaceful home felt too dusty, too silent, and too heavy with Thomas's absence. In a bizarre frenzy of activity, I spent the following several days cleaning, organizing, and rearranging pictures on the wall, including the large one from our wedding, where James was standing next to Thomas, beaming. In fact, I bought fresh flowers for myself, something I hadn't done in a long time. Thomas's favorite and Lily's strong aroma filled the foyer like a fragrant ghost. Why did I feel so nervous? The only thing that seemed to be constant was James' gentle, steady James, with his easy chuckle and somewhat disheveled appearance. Was it something else, something more difficult to identify, or was I afraid of bringing up unpleasant memories? Seeing Thomas's absence mirrored in his closest friend's eyes, he was afraid of how drastically life had altered. Friday came clear and bright. I picked out a basic blue sweater that Thomas had always liked after considerable consideration. As I prepared coffee, I plated cookies, the type my mother used to make and that Thomas and James would eat after school. With excruciating slowness, the clock moved closer to 2. Then a small vehicle arrived into the driveway at precisely the right moment. A strange little leap went through my heart. James was reaching for the bell when I opened the front door after taking a deep breath. Naturally, he appeared older, with deeper creases around his eyes and more gray strands running through his dark hair. However, the smile remained warm and slightly tentative. His voice was quieter than I remembered when he said, "Evelyn, seeing you is pleasant. James, you too." I succeeded in taking a step back. "Enter now." He walked into the house, looking around the well-known corridor and briefly focusing on the wedding picture. His face briefly flashed with melancholy, but he quickly covered it up with another smile. "The place still looks fantastic." "Mostly," I responded as I ushered him into the living room. "I suppose some things remain the same while others change." He sat on the couch and I sat in the armchair across from him. The armchair of Thomas. For a minute there was an unsettling quiet, broken only by the sound of the ticking clock and the subtle aroma of lilies. He cleared his throat. "How have you been doing then?" "Really?" I was taken aback by the candor, but I valued it. There should be no cliches or skirting the issue. The enormous void in each of our lives that resembles Thomas. I decided to be honest and took a deep breath. Don't worry, James. There are better days and bad days. You are aware of the situation. I played with a cushion's edge. I never imagined it could be that silent. With comprehension in his eyes, he nodded slowly. Yes, I still occasionally pick up the phone in the hopes of calling him about a game score or some dumb thing I observed. Then I recall. He lowered his gaze to his hands. Doesn't it leave a great void? The discomfort vanished instantly, and the common language of loss took its place. Thus, we discussed Thomas with ease and spontaneity. I had never heard the story James told about their adolescent fishing expedition, which involved a capsized canoe and a furious swan. I chuckled, a sincere laugh that was rusty but enjoyable. In the early days of our marriage, Thomas made a terrible attempt at baking sourdough bread, which turned out to be something like fossilized brick. I informed him about it. In this manner, we spent the afternoon exchanging memories like priceless jewels, each one clearly recalling Thomas as the kind, humorous, and occasionally annoying man we had both loved, not as a cause of suffering. James listened carefully as he inquired about my garden and my work at the library. He wasn't just engaging in courteous conversation, he seemed really engaged. He took note of the dining room's new curtains and bookcase, among other minor adjustments. He pointed to the kitchen walls and said, "You painted in here." It was a gentle sage green now, rather than the bright yellow Thomas had demanded. Yes, I grinned. It seemed like a welcome change. I never really liked the color yellow. He laughed. Describe it to me. Thomas claimed it was hopeful and painted the bathroom of our college apartment that exact tint. In the morning, it largely just caused eye pain. For more coffee, we went into the kitchen. James leaned against the counter and watched the backyard through the window as I poured. The lawn was covered in lengthy shadows as the afternoon light faded. He cherished this garden. Spent hours out here, didn't you? James murmured softly. I gave him a mug and made sure he did, pointing out the flowers in particular. He was really pleased with them. James seemed contemplative as he moved away from the window. I wanted to pop by because, Evelyn, he started off a little cautiously. In addition to seeing you, Thomas wanted me to do something, of course. My brow furrowed as he forced me make a long-ago pledge about which Thomas had spoken nothing. What was it? As he collected his thoughts, James took a drink of his coffee. He had just received his first major diagnosis, the one they believed they had defeated. He got philosophical and, I believe, afraid while we were enjoying a beer late one evening, though he made an effort to hide it. He stopped and met my eyes directly. He forced me to swear that I would check in on you, not immediately, but later on if something ever happened to him. Verify that you were indeed all right, and he paused once more. Only when I thought it was appropriate did he ask me to offer you something. He wanted James to give me another unsettling jolt in my heart. Why didn't he leave it with his will or give it to me directly? What is it? With hardly more than a whisper, I asked. James took out a little, well-worn, leather-bound book from the inside pocket of his jacket. The book wasn't meant to be read. With a small leather strap holding it closed, it resembled a journal or diary. It appeared worn down and aged. He extended it toward me. He referred to it as his thankfulness diary. James gave a quiet explanation. He began writing down his blessings and significant experiences long ago, before he even met you, I believe. He said that he wasn't always the best at speaking aloud, particularly when it came to the more profound topics. He stated he wanted you to have it eventually because it contained the things he didn't always know how to say. My fingers shook a little as they touched his as I took the journal. Years of being held had sculpted the leather into a delicate, almost velvety texture. It was cozy and personal. It was a physical representation of Thomas that I was unaware of. I felt a knot in my throat as I touched the weathered cover. How come he hadn't told me? Why give it to James? Maybe he was aware that I wouldn't be prepared to read it at once. Maybe he needed time as a buffer, and James, his loyal friend, was the timekeeper. James said in a soft voice. He said you'd know when to read it. Or if you even wanted to, no pressure. but he wanted you to have the option. I held the little book close to my chest as a flood of emotion swept over me. Yes, there is grief, but there is also a deep sensation of being seen, of being loved, even in the hush of death. My eyes pricked with tears. Many thanks, James. The words were thick as I whispered. I appreciate you bringing it and keeping it safe. With a profound comprehension in his eyes, he just nodded. The unspoken weight of Thomas's life, his love, and his foresight filled the space between us as we stood in the silent kitchen, the fading light painting the room in colors of gray and gold. It was more than simply a notebook. It was a message, a connection from the one person Thomas had complete faith in, the surprise of the present, the extent of Thomas's preparation, and James's silent keeping of his word. In an oddly consoling sense, it was overwhelming. James gently cleared his throat. Part of the pledge is one more thing, Evelyn. Curious, I looked up. He made me swear that if the rear gate continued to stick, I would assist you in fixing it. I blinked and then laughed a little. For years, the back gate had been stuck, a small inconvenience that Thomas always intended to remedy but never did. After the seriousness of the journal, it seemed like such a minor, unimportant detail. I said with a tiny smile on my lips, "It's still sticking." James smiled as usual, the old glitter returning to his eyes. There are some things that never change. He looked at the microwave's clock. Look, I should probably leave shortly. Make your way to the conference hotel. However, I could have a quick check if you have a screwdriver and possibly some oil. It felt natural to Thomas, a useful assignment, a moment spent together repairing something material after enduring so much nebulous emotion. As I led the way to the messy drawer next to the back door, where Thomas kept his tools, it seemed as though I had everything he needed. We stepped outside into the refreshing evening breeze. James studied the hinges of the aged and wooden gate, which moaned in complaint. I found some oil in the garage, and he tightened several screws and tinkered with the latch. As we worked side by side in cozy silence, we didn't say anything. The only sounds are the crickets beginning their evening symphony and the metallic scrape of the screwdriver. The task brought a calm camaraderie and a basic contentment. I was allowing him to keep a commitment he made. Despite being a little gesture, it felt important and served as a link between the past and the present. He opened and closed the gate several times. It went silently and smoothly. Good as new, or at least better than it was, he replied, wiping his hands on a rag. With a sincere smile, he turned to face me. The promise was fulfilled. The sky was now painted in orange and purple strokes as the sun had sunk beneath the trees. I experienced a deep sense of calm that I hadn't experienced in a long time. It felt like a turning moment to stand there with Thomas's oldest friend, James, after receiving this unexpected piece of my husband's heart and seeing this small act of loyalty. James picked up his jacket from the chair in the kitchen. This time, the air felt warmer and lighter. The original uneasiness had long since vanished, and in its place was a fresh sense of connection, not just between us, but also via Thomas. Sincerely stopping at the door, he said, "Thank you, Evelyn, for letting me come by, for sharing the afternoon." "Thank you, James," I said, looking him in the eye. "For everything, including the journal, the gate, and simple conversation." He gave a nod. "Don't be a stranger, Evelyn, and take care of yourself." I added, "You too, James, if you ever feel like talking or need anything." He waved briefly before making his way back to his vehicle. The red taillights vanished down the silent street as I watched him drive off. With the small leather-bound journal still in my hand, I closed the door and leaned against it for a moment. The house no longer felt so deserted. There was a gentler, less total silence. Despite its surprise, James's presence had brought more than simply memories. Connection, closure I hadn't expected, and the journal, physical evidence of Thomas's unwavering love were all brought about by it. I returned to the living room, which was now softly lit by the lamps I had turned on. This time, I put the journal on the side table and sat in my own chair rather than Thomas's. Even though I wasn't prepared to open it tonight, it felt like a gift to know that it was there and that James had kept his word. The goal was not to erase the sadness or replace Thomas. It was about realizing that friendship can fill the void left by loss, that ties can last, and that often the most unexpected encounters may provide the most solace. Something had changed inside of me, but life hadn't suddenly become simple. A window had opened, allowing some air and light to enter. It served as a reminder that despite the most profound loss, there are still opportunities for knowledge, growth, and connection in life. And perhaps it begins with an old friend dropping by to assist you fix a sticky gate and keeping their word.